Latin America has a huge homophobic killing problem, and it's really difficult to get concrete numbers on this because oftentimes authorities refuse to actually keep record of it or report it because they either don't care because of the sexual orientation of that person or laziness, but usually it could have to do with them just being vicious toward that group of people. So just to give you some numbers, and again, the numbers could be much higher than this. In Brazil, there are about 300 to 350 homophobic killings per year. There are likely an additional 500 slayings each year.
That's according to some of the experts who deal with these issues about the ones that don't get reported. And a lot of people might find that surprising because Brazil is considered open when it comes to transgendered individuals, you know, when Carnival, etc. This sense of Brazil as an open and free country. It is in some parts, and in other parts it's far, far more conservative, and they're not at all open about it.
So one hypothesis about the violence toward gay people in Latin America is that now increasingly you're seeing some politicians pushing for equality and a ban on discrimination toward gay people, right? And as a result, those who are deeply homophobic are lashing out against them. You know, so it sounds like a crazy argument because I immediately think about the cartel argument, you know, that Calderon gave. Calderon would always make the argument that, yeah, of course, the cartels are being even more vicious because we're getting them. You know, we're going after them and we're successful. But I think in terms of what's happening with the gay population in Latin America, it's true. I mean, if you have people coming out and defending gay people, the haters are going to hate harder and they're going to push harder.
Because like they did with Obama in this country, you know, they would have the rallies where some of the right-winger conservatives would come out and say, I want my country back, right? So I feel that a lot of these people in whatever countries, this story happens to be about Latin America, but obviously we've seen the backlash in Russia as well, and from time to time we've seen it here in the US, where people are basically saying, I want my country, my way of life back, right? And that way of life was more conservative. Now, as usual, progressives are, you know, want freedom extended to everybody. Conservatives all across the world don't want anything to change, and if it means giving freedom and rights to other people, they're against it. Yeah. That's why conservatives are almost always on the losing side of history. Because yes, they will win for a long period of time until eventually we get change, and that freedom is extended to more and more people. And this is unfortunately one of the ugly side effects of that, as people fight back in some horrific ways, like in Peru.
Absolutely. So I want to give you some more numbers because I think it's important. 80% of the transgender activists in Latin America say they've been physically attacked. So, of course, that population includes people who are transgender, but just simply being an activist for that cause will lead people to go after you and attack you very violently. And if you look at Guatemala and Colombia, you also see some pretty sad numbers. And look, relatively speaking, it looks like a very small amount, but remember, a lot of transgender people don't come out. You know, they're not as open. So let's look at Colombia. There have been about 60 transgender murders in Colombia between 2005 and 2012, and 35 slayings in Guatemala. And again, for the third time, remember that these numbers are underreported, or these cases are underreported, so there are many more. And then finally, you know, the Global Post profiled this one story that I really wanted to bring up to you guys so you understand just how brutal these murders are. There was a story of this 19-year-old in Peru who was openly gay. His name is, or was, Joel Molero. And he went out with his friends one night. He did karaoke. And the next morning, authorities found him. And this is the way that they found him. They said that his throat had been cut, his fingers, toes, and genitals sliced off, and his remains stuffed into a straw mattress and set on fire. Police were only able to identify him by his bracelet.
So yes, from time to time we see progress in Latin America and throughout the world on these issues, and overall we're headed in the right direction. But there's still a lot of ugliness out there. Don't think that the battle has been won entirely, and you got to remember that these people need all of us fighting for their freedoms and liberties. Because, you know, you might live in a big city or you might live in a country where gays, lesbians, transgender people, etc. have more rights. But these folks that are in conservative towns in smaller areas, whether it's the US, Latin America, or anywhere else, they're not beyond it, right? And it is a mortal danger to them. And so we got to get it right and we need a lot more progress. I mean, look, in Venezuela, Maduro, who was Chavez's right-hand man who wound up winning the elections, even he would say derisive things like he called his opponent a little princess, and said, at least I'm not single. So, implying that his opponent was gay. And that's the ultra leftist in Venezuela. So there's still a long way to go before they have the same rights that we all do and should have.